1865. 25,000 people resided in Kansas City, Missouri when the first railroad bridge crossed the Missouri River. Even with this innovation, the city streets and finances were in shambles, fraud was alive, and water systems were lacking. Kansas City needed definition in order to become a viable city. The 1890s to 1940s ensured that Kansas City would be memorable. Many of Kansas City's most recognizable elements, its broad, sweeping boulevards, beautiful fountains, and vast parks with rugged terrain, can be attributed to the work of George Kessler. His life began in 1862 in Germany, but in 1865 his family moved to America, ultimately settling in Dallas, Texas. His mother realized the creativity within George and hoped that it would be developed in a practical manner. Taking advice from relatives, his mother pushed Kessler towards landscape architecture, a field that would suit his creative yet practical temperament. To mold him in this way, the family moved back to Germany, where Kessler undertook an apprenticeship at the Grand Ducal Gardens to study botany, design, and forestry. Quickly gaining technical engineering knowledge, Kessler then studied at Germany's premier horticultural library. After finishing a civil engineering course, Kessler traveled around Europe with his tutor, gaining much influence in his civic design preferences from Paris and Moscow. Of all of it, Kessler stated, the travel was of the most value. Kessler returned to the United States in 1881 and began corresponding with Frederick Law Olmsted Sr., the famed father of landscape architecture and designer of the lovely and open Central Park. Olmsted saw great potential in Kessler and advised him to be ambitious to be master in higher fields. Olmsted recommended Kessler for an open position in Merriam, Kansas, to work on the public picnic and excursion grounds for a railway company. Invigorated with success, Kessler opened an office in Kansas City and searched for more work. After Kansas City's real estate boom from 1880 to 1887, speculation ran rampant, leaving many vacant homes. As a fix, 2 new subdivisions, Hyde Park and Kenwood, were designed to remove any reservations of the wealthy. In the right place at the right time, as his biggest commission, Kessler was charged to landscape the rugged, hollow Hyde Park. These beautifying methods were later used by the middle class to segregate themselves through deed restrictions. To design the wealthy neighborhood of Hyde Park, Kessler was hired to guard the ravine against the undesirables, and then later to beautify the city to spark economic growth that would allow Kansas City to compete with other cities, to become the ideal American city. Kessler presented his comprehensive Parks and Boulevards plan for the city, saying, "Each bit and piece should be understandable by reference to the great plan of which it is a part." Smaller green spaces and playgrounds were scattered through the connected system of parks, including Swope Park. Unfortunately, Kessler was aware and was purposed by his aim to keep and raise property values of the selected, finer areas of the city.
No doubt, there were 3 neighborhoods that were slums when the plan was developed, and the plan was to clear those slums, and they did. But it was also the fact that the population was growing tremendously, and so we needed new housing. But how do you maintain the existing quality housing while you're growing the city? And it wasn't a social program except for recreational. And so there really wasn't a consideration at that time of what to do with the people that were being removed from the slums.
Kessler then brought his 26 comprehensive parks plans to cities across the Midwest, including Cincinnati, Memphis, Dallas, Indianapolis, and Cleveland. Each plan was specific for the region and took into consideration environmental concerns like flood mitigation. This attention to context and ability to adapt to new environments make him the premier landscape architect in the Midwest. One of his most notable projects was in Dallas. The Kessler Plan in 1909 was commissioned by the Dallas Chamber of Commerce to make long-range civic improvements to the city. Although Kessler created plans for multiple cities, no city has implemented his vision to the extent that Kansas City has.
There's been many other cities that have had systems designed by Kessler that weren't implemented as much as Kansas City's was. They envy us.
Although Kessler moved on from Kansas City, residents are still impacted by his designs today. The Hyde Park neighborhood and the majority of neighborhoods surrounding the parks and boulevard systems have steadily appreciated in value and, in years of economic downturn, have withstood the threat of declining property values. Additionally, Kessler's ideas influenced another notable Kansas City developer, J.C. Nichols. Kessler's Parks and Boulevards design is featured in the Country Club Plaza. Despite the overwhelmingly positive effects that Kessler's projects have had on Kansas City, they have also caused unintentional side effects as well. Due to the increase in the value of properties surrounding the system, it cannot be accessed and enjoyed equally. As Kansas City continues to grow, it has added to its Parks and Boulevards system. After Kessler's original plan for the Park and Boulevard system was completed in 1915, it remained relatively untouched until after World War II. The first additions linked the Paseo and West Terrace, creating Admiral Boulevard. Then, West Terrace was joined with Penn Valley by a diagonal boulevard, thus creating a closed circuit. Kessler's original 40 miles have now evolved into 135 miles of boulevards and parkways. This extensive network is now on the National Register of Historic Places. Seeing the value of the Parks and Boulevard system, many places in Kansas City are now attempting to recreate it. Without the genius of Kessler, they are running into many difficulties.
I think it's valued by many areas. In fact, we're working on some stuff north of the river, and they want to emulate the Parks and Boulevard system and recreate the neighborhoods that are from 75th Street North or 85th Street North, and they're struggling with how they do that and still being driven by the developers.
Kansas City's Park Commission has strict standards for the design and land use of their Parks and Boulevard system and see them both as integral parts of Kansas City.
Oh, I think his legacy is the high quality historic housing we have. And by historic, I don't mean just the historic neighborhoods, but also the areas of Brookside, the Country Club Plaza areas, that we wouldn't still have the same quality of housing if we hadn't had the Parks and Boulevard system.
The high standards set by the design guidelines ensure that Kessler's vision for Kansas City remains intact. Kessler envisioned a more beautiful Kansas City where residential property values will never diminish. Kessler's vision continues to come true as property surrounding the Park and Boulevard systems remains highly desirable and values remain stable, while certain socioeconomic groups are still absent from these areas.